Welcome to the Where Her Money Works podcast, brought to you by XTB. In line with International Women's Day, XTB has brought us together as female creators in the world of finance and investing to discuss an ongoing problem: the lack of female investors in the UK. According to HMRC, 43% of all stocks and shares ISA accounts in the UK are owned by women. But this is not the full story. When looking at younger professionals aged 25 to 34, who are most likely at the beginning of their careers and earning potential, this number decreases to only 38%. So do we have a problem with a younger generation of women getting into investing? How did this problem come about? And how do we combat this to ensure we educate and empower a new generation of financially savvy women? That's what we'll be discussing today. Welcome, ladies. It is lovely to see you again. So you know me, but I am Charlotte Jessop, founder of Looking After Your Pennies, and I would love for you guys to introduce yourselves as well, please.
I am Commodore. I am founder of Pennies to Pounds, and I'm also an author and financial educator.
Congratulations on the book.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Hello. So I'm Abigail Foster. I am the founder of Ellen, which is a financial education company. We teach finance in schools and workplaces. I am also finance content creator and author. So my book comes out in May. So yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
So I'm going to start with probably the obvious question here, which is what inspired you to start creating financial content online? What was your motivation? And Abby, I'm going to go to you first on this one.
I think it was a lack of representation, just like the lack of women in our space, you know, and how loud we have to shout to be heard. I think that kind of instilled this sense of like confidence that you just have to keep going, Abby, because other women need to see you to feel like they can do this. You know, I grew up, my mum is a hairdresser, and there was lots of people that used to walk through like her doors where they'd confide loads in their hairdresser and be like, you know, oh, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that. But yet, if you said to them, oh, have you spoken to your accountant about this? Or if you've spoken to a financial advisor, they'd be like, God, no, absolutely not doing that. Like, it's so scary. And it's because there's just such a lack of representation. And I just also felt like it's very mansplaining. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot on there of like, this is how you make £1 million overnight. And it's like, okay, what about pay slips? Can we dial this back? Like, I feel like we're missing this in-between bit. So yeah, I kind of brought so I am a chartered accountant by profession. I qualified a few years ago now and was an accountant for many, many years. And I had that. And then I was like, right, okay, what about the representation? What about being out there and seeing other people doing it? So yeah, I suppose for me, it was just lack of representation.
I love that. I think mine is very similar. I come from a background where I'm from is in inner city East London, one of the poorest areas in London. And there wasn't financial education. You know, you're kind of born into this area, like myself and my family, and it's almost like the decks have been stacked against you. And I didn't want that for myself. I didn't want that for my friends. I was fortunate enough that my parents had taught me quite a lot of financial education growing up. So I wanted to go back and teach people. I'd start teaching my friends first. They'd come to me when I was in university, ask me how to make a budget, ask me how to save their money, because obviously the first time we're ever seeing thousands of pounds in our accounts. And then I realised that if they're struggling, there's probably other young people like us who are also struggling. So I turned to social media. I didn't really see many young Black women with my kind of upbringing and background talking about finance online and talking about it in a way that we can understand. Because, you know, you're from East London, there's a lot of slang that's used, there's a lot of this and that. And I wanted to communicate to an audience who I think had probably previously felt like they had been disregarded by financial institutions and financial education. So I wanted to kind of bring them in and represent them as well.
Yeah, I think that representation is important. I started my own journey in this space as a parent and feeling like young mums weren't really being spoken to online. And I feel that even more so. You know, I come from a rural-ish part of the UK, and I don't see a lot of people from my sort of background speaking. So whilst I came into it as a parent thinking I'm just going to talk about my life as a mum, now I feel even more proactive in talking in that space because, you know, it's okay to be a mum. It's okay to be a single mum. This is the challenges that we face. This is what it's like. So I started because I wanted to speak about my issues, but actually it's that motivation has continued just by the need to have a variety of voices
agree.
in a finance space.
Oh, I'm so here for more women.
Absolutely.
Like that we need more women. There's enough like of, you know, but we just need, because people always say to me, oh, but like, is it not competition? No. Look at us. Look at who we represent. You know, we don't represent the same people, and that's magical. Like, because there's so many different types of women out there that need this, and they might not see themselves in one person, but they will in another, and that's what's really important. And you know, we all think that we hope that our videos go out to everyone, but they don't. They go out to people that want them at that perfect time.
Yes.
As soon as it's posted, they're looking for it, and then that's where it hits them. But that's not always the case. So 100% more of us.
Absolutely. And as much variety and different backgrounds.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
speak up in a space that is largely dominated by men.
Yes.
Yeah.
So on that note, have you ever faced any challenges or pushback when speaking in this financial space? Kia?
Good question. I would say not as much now, but I'd say it's because I've worked for years to push back, that pushback. When I began talking about financial education, I was 21. I was fresh out of university, like I said, a young Black woman. And I'm going into spaces that aren't used to seeing people like me in them. And I remember I went up and I got called to do this radio segment. And I was so excited. I was like, okay, cool. I knew exactly what I was going to talk about. And then instead of asking me those questions, the radio host asked me what qualifies me to talk about these things. Trying to belittle, because they were saying, but you're so young, you have no experience, you have this, that. Almost making me feel like I'm inexperienced, I'm not someone that should be listened to. Obviously, I was prepared for that little curveball and I threw it back at them. But it was years of almost feeling like I had to prove myself because I am a young Black woman. What is it that you could know? What can you teach people? And why should I listen to you instead of just going online on YouTube and listen to a man talk about something? So there's always that pushback. But I always think if I can do it to make it easier for people coming up after me, the women who want to do the same thing or want to get into finance spaces, maybe not education, but you want to be a chartered accountant, you want to be a financial advisor, then hopefully if we kind of push those barriers down, then it makes it easier for those people coming up. But I've definitely faced that quite a lot.
Do you think it's different now?
Oh, do I think it's different now? I think there's more respect for what we do now, 100%. I don't think I think there's probably still some barriers that still need to come down, but I definitely think it's easier than it was when I started at 21, for sure.
Yeah. Now, how about yourself, Abby?
Yeah, like, and do you know what? Just never hear that question asked to a man. Like, and that's not me being like, oh, you know, like it's only happening to us. It just, honestly, so many men. So for instance, I thought about this and I have a very recent example. So on Sunday mornings, I do like a very short segment on a radio show called LBC. And every Sunday I talk about different finance topics for a very short period of time. Chat to the host. It's very lovely. I love it. LBC is entirely words, no music, so it's great. We just talk. This Sunday, Matthew, the host, said to me just before, he was like, do you mind if I ask you about your position as being a woman in a very masculine space? And I was like, of course, because a lot of the moment they're talking about Rachel from accounts and tearing her down. Doesn't matter your political opinions on her and her policies. Like everyone can see there's a lot of misogyny going on around her, you know. Various things that her predecessors have done would never have been scrutinized the way that it has been for her. And that's what they were talking about. So he said, do you feel that in this space? And I said, yes, 100%. And it's sad, really, because, you know, I always hear men never get asked their qualifications. I always get asked mine. And I always think, why is it relevant? Like, you find what I'm saying interesting and it's true.
Yep.
Great.
It's factual, correct.
Yeah, crack on. And actually, what was wild, because I thought we were coming to this place in our world where that wouldn't happen anymore and that me being a woman wasn't so unique. And I came off the show and I went into my emails and I had an email from a certain guy, and he basically he'd spent enough time to go through my work website and create a contact form and do all of this stuff to basically tell me that he was calling me like a man hater.
Wow.
And he called me lots of very unfriendly names, and how, you know, he had respect for me because the first part of my talk on LBC was about cash ISAs, and then I talked about being a woman in the space, and he was like, I respected you completely when you were talking about cash ISAs and I thought you were actually really good, and then you opened your mouth about man hating and I lost all respect for you. And I was like, that's interesting, because actually I didn't hate on men at all. I just said how it feels to be me. And I don't represent all women, but I do represent me. And it was actually a really stark kind of slap in the face that we aren't far away. We're not far enough along as we should be. There's still men out there that find it really intimidating that we are who we are. And that's really sad because, you know, why did he have respect for me when I could explain ISAs and cash ISAs? But then because I said that actually, you know, there's misogyny and sexism going on, that now he doesn't have respect for me because I'm not allowed to have those opinions. That I thought was really, it was very sad actually. And I think when you're on social media, we're just expected to take those hits because of what we do for a living. And people, like, honestly, some of my friends, and they meant it in the best way, but some of my friends said, oh, but did you get messages like that a lot? And I'm like, that doesn't make any of them okay. Like, I'm still human. Can you imagine if someone emailed you if you had a 9-to-5 job and you're just doing your day-to-day job and someone was leaning over your shoulder and being like, you're actually really crap at this. Like, I don't like what you've done.
You'd lose your confidence, wouldn't it?
Yeah. But because we do social media, it's just accepted that they should be allowed to do that to us. You know, anyway, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think as you were talking about social media there, I was reflecting on the fact that I think probably 98% of any critical comments that I've received have been from men. And if I was to categorize them into, you know, like, this is at least relevant to the topic that we're talking about versus a criticism of the way I look, my circumstance, you know, the way I sound, what I'm wearing. The vast majority are on some unrelated topic. And interestingly, if I go into the space and I'm talking about investing, it's very common for me to get some sort of criticism. Yet when I look at our male counterparts that are doing similar things, you know, I never see your hair looks weird today, mate, or, you know, like, why do you sound like that, you know, or how do you know what you're talking about, you know, you just don't see that. They're all like, nice one, mate, you know, quality advice, and it's very different. Whereas, you know, it's just questions and criticism usually. And I don't know why I go snooping around into other people's accounts, just trying to prove that point. You know, because that doesn't do any wonders for my mental health. But it is true. And I think, you know, interestingly, and if I talk about things like saving money or being frugal or, you know, like managing, you know, writing a meal plan for my family, those sorts of things get far less criticism than when I talk about things like building wealth and investing. And you know, there's a gender bias in those topics as well.
Yeah. Do you know what as well? And something I did say on Sunday is, like, it's the representation that we have for other younger women as well. Because I was like, you know, young girls are looking at Rachel Reeves. She is the very first female chancellor. She's one of a kind. And they're looking to how she's being received. And if they, you know, if I was 17 years old and I thought, do you know what, one day I want to be a politician and I want to be chancellor, and I looked at the way she was being treated, I'd be like, nah, I'll go into banking. Do you know what I mean? I'll go into anything else. And I think that's the other thing. When I get negative comments on my social, there's a part of me that wants to delete, because I don't want any young girl to look at my account and think that the way they spoke to me was okay, and that I just left it because it was okay to speak to me like that because I'm on social. Because I think what we do for a living is a career now for many young women. Absolutely. You know, talking about finance, engaging in finance, all the way up to influencers. Like, you know, it should be okay. And I don't want young girls to look at my page and be like, oh God, she got a few, like, you know, there's a viral video, but 90% of the comments are men, you know, addressing the way she looks. You know, don't get me wrong. I don't like, obviously other women will be like, I like your hair. And I'm like, that's great. Thank you. And they're like, I'm so sorry. It's not about finance. I'm like, that's all right. I do my hair
for the
so other people,
as well as the criticism. Yeah. So on this note, why do you think there are fewer women in the finance space, and particularly talking about finance and investing? Do you think there are stigmas, barriers, stereotypes? I mean, we've touched on some of this already, but you know, if you could summarize it into one thing, what would it be?
I can talk about it from my end. Obviously, I've got a different perspective because I am from a Caribbean background. So if I talk about it in general, I think it applies generally, but also in the Black community, there is this stereotype of the man is still the man of the house, especially in Caribbean households. Like my dad is very much so the man of the house. The difference is that I also know about finances, right? But in general, all my friends from whatever background, a lot of the time it is that women have their certain role. You're doing that, and the men handle the heavy lifting, which is the financial side. So if you're not empowered from the household, now you get your first job. And different cultures, some people, the first paycheck goes to their parents, so they have to tell their parents how much money they make. It almost removes the control. It almost is like you're not trustworthy enough to manage your money. We'll do it for you. So it's parents first, but then if you bring it down to the hierarchy, it's probably the man in the house, whether it's your dad or your older brother or something like that. So I think a lot of women kind of feel like, I don't know a lot about my finances. I kind of have enough money to get around and go to work and see my friends, and that's about it. I'm not sure about anything else. And if you get a partner, they take care of that, and I just know we've got money. That's about it. So I don't think we're necessarily empowered all the time growing up. Obviously, some people, households are different, but I think a lot of the times we see that empowerment is removed from women, so they grow up thinking that they can't manage it.
I have an interesting story on this one, actually, because I have 2 daughters. They are 9 and 7. So it's just all women in my household. My partner moved out of the house sort of like a year ago. So we were going through a separation. We were having a conversation, and I was talking about investing because I'm that mum, obviously. Yes. And interestingly, my 9-year-old daughter, we were talking about responsibilities in the household, and I have always been the breadwinner in my household. I've always been the one that's managed the money. And she made this comment. She was like, "Oh yes, but you do all these things around the house, but isn't it like mostly the man's job to make the money?" And I was like, "What?" Like, where have you been getting that from? So these are obviously things that are perpetuated, in society, because that's certainly not something that I have encouraged, a viewpoint that I've encouraged at home. But you can see that even in a fiercely feminist household, she still has picked up on those ideas, and you can understand why, those barriers to women in finance still exist, even though I'm trying to combat that.
Yeah,
it's still seeped into my daughter.
I was just about to say that. I was going to say
one.
Media and sport, the media still portrays like this like hierarchical house of like men at the top and women at the bottom doing the cleaning, and like that just doesn't happen anymore. And sport, I'm F1 obsessed, like I love it, and I don't get me wrong, Drive to Survive it's all about the male drivers, and so I fell like into that world, and I was like very invested. And then when I realized that there's a female Formula team, I was, oh my god, I actually met one of the drivers yesterday in the gym. Almost lost. I lost all cool whatsoever. I didn't even try and retain it. I was stood next to her in the gym looking in the mirror, and I looked and I was like, oh my god, that's Bianca. And she's a race driver for McLaren. And I literally looked to my right and I was like, oh my god, I have to say something. And she must have removed her headphones for like a fraction of a second, and that was my chance.
That was your chance.
Yeah. I was like, I literally grabbed her. I was like, you're an inspiration. And she must have been like, the hell, I'm being accosted in the gym. But I was like, you are such an inspiration to young women. They did a partner, like the Formula women's team did a partnership with like Charlotte Tilbury. And I thought that was so lovely, because sometimes in women's sport, it goes a bit, they walk away from being feminist, like feminine. Yes. But actually, they were like very much leaning into it. And I'm not saying all girls need to wear makeup at all. But yeah, I think representation in media and sport will help. I went to a female game at Arsenal yesterday. It was so, I felt such pride. But I watched these women and I was like, my heart just like went out of my chest, and I was like, I'm so proud of you, of everything that you have had to go through to get onto this Emirates pitch. Sorry, my football lingo is really bad. Like, to get onto this pitch and score a goal against all of the odds against you, that is impressive. And I think, from my perspective as someone that teaches kids in schools, and I think this word is just like the word of the podcast, it's representation. Like young girls don't see enough investing. They don't see enough, women in these high power positions. And that's what they need to see to feel like they can get there, because it's that age-old saying, like, you can't be what you can't see. And, we might be the first of our kind, and that's wonderful. But think of all the trials we've had to go through to get here. I don't want girls to have to go through what we've gone through. I don't want any other women to get like a message on their DMs on a Sunday morning about how crap they are. Like, oh, no.
No.
Like, yeah. Anyway, I'm going off.
Yeah. No. Like, as a mother of daughters, I am very, very fierce about this and making sure that what I had to do to be here. And I was very lucky. I went to an all-girls school, so I never saw any sort of...
Oh my God.
I never saw any of those sort of like genderized subjects. You know, like, I studied maths because I liked maths, and, you know, I never saw it as anything other than a subject that I enjoyed. But, you know, like, we have to have those spaces sometimes to be able to, you know, change those opinions and change the future for those younger generations. And I got a new baby niece this week, so now I'm fierce for her as well. Like, the more girls that enter my family, I'm like, I've got to be better. We've got to change this.
100%.
So, do you think social media has helped women to talk about finance and money, and how so?
Yeah, like, without a doubt, you know, more women, like, and I love it. Women feel very comfortable coming up and talking to me, or sliding into the DMs in a good way and asking me my opinions and like my thoughts. And obviously I have to always caveat, it's all financial education. Nothing is advice. And you should never, ever receive advice from social media. But yeah, women are feeling more confident because they've got a place, they've got their own space to ask questions. You know, for years and years, this finance space has been so masculine. It's been in like members clubs and, you know, boys' locker rooms. That's very American, sorry. But you know what I mean? Like boys' changing rooms. It's just been very not where we are. And now I think we just need to be talking about it more openly so that they feel like it's exactly where they are. You know, I do think so.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with what you said. And I think a big thing, you both might feel the same, there's a big shift towards community. I think we're seeing more online communities, we're seeing more in-person communities, and we've needed this for years. We've needed a community where women can come together and talk about money and finance. You can talk about, I want to go for a salary increase. How do I do it? Oh, I want to invest. I want to get in a property. Where do I start? And I think a lot more women are feeling like they've got a community of women who are on the same page. Because often if you look around in your peers, you know, your friendship groups, families, you might feel like you're being left behind. And a lot of the times you speak to people and like, oh my gosh, I should have been here by this age. And I'm like, no. Then you look at the wider audience, you go on social media, like, oh, actually, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. And I know how to get to the next stage. And I think that's made people feel like they can do it and they can actually reach the goals and the targets that they want. Because sometimes you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm left behind. I have friends who are married with kids and I'm like, oh, I'm not there. I'm really not there. But then you go online and you find your community who are where you're at and you're like, oh, okay, cool. I feel good.
Yeah. I think that's true too. I think also the benefit of social media is that you can reach people at different stages of their lives as well. And, you know, I've lived my life on social media for close to a decade now. And
really?
Long time.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Wow.
And actually I've resonated with different people at different times. You know, like when I was a young mum, you know, I was appealing to different people at that time. And actually social media it's about this representation. It's also about audience and just different people and what they need in that moment. And there's a sense of familiarity that comes with following someone online and just having these little snippets into their personal lives, you know, and you know those moments when you post a little video and you got a spot on your chin and you know your hair's gone a bit wild, but you're like, I am raging about what I've just seen in the news and I need to come on and talk about it. That sense of familiarity is great. And you know, as part of my own going through this process of divorce, what I have seen is so many women whose partners, you know, husbands have been the ones that have looked after the finances, and they might be looking for a way out. And I've seen women who are, you know, in situations where they're being abused, or you know, they've got horrible things going on, but they feel stuck in relationships and things like this. And actually being a familiar face and a friendly face on social media and someone who is, you know, an expert in a field, they feel comfortable to reach out to me on what is essentially a private and, you know, friendly space, a space that is theirs, because they can't go to their partners or they can't speak to other members of their family about it for fear of what might happen. So actually, I think social media does really great work for women in being there when they need it, and more so than ever in the finance space.
Absolutely.
Yeah, agreed.
Today, more than ever, it's essential that our money is being constantly put to work. At XTB, that's our mission. Our goal is to offer solutions that enable our clients' money to work for them in a variety of ways. Open a flexible stocks and shares ISA with XTB today to earn a boosted interest rate of 6.5% interest on your uninvested funds for the first 90 days of the opening of your ISA, from the 1st of March to the 30th of April. Terms and conditions apply. Download the XTB app today and start making your money work for you. Buy stocks and ETFs commission-free, invest passively with investment plans, earn interest on uninvested funds and more. XTB, where your money works.
So, according to some research conducted by XTB, young women from the southwest of England on relatively modest salaries are the best savers in the UK, but they are also the most cautious investors. So even HMRC's ISA data backs this, as the total percentage of cash ISAs held by women is 57%. So it essentially looks like women are bigger savers than investors. And we've sort of touched on this a little bit already. So why do we think we're likely to see more women saving with products like cash ISAs than investing with products like stocks and ETFs?
So I would say parents are often a good indicator of this in its easiest form. It's because they want to look after others before you want to look after yourself. And this often happens with women. Is women will always come to me, like if I do anything with mums, they'll always say, how do I save for my child? I'm like, can we just take a back step here? Do you have your own savings? Do you have your own investments? And they're like, no, but it's really important I save for my child. I'm like, no, we're putting our own mask on before we're helping others. And that goes across, that is finance as well. You must secure yourself. And I think women, like I said, we're always looking to help other people. And we always think, well, maybe I'll need that money to help someone else. Maybe I'll need that money for this or that. And we forget to be like, okay, well, how about building my wealth? What about, helping other women in my circle build their wealth? Where's that? So yeah, I would say it's just because we're inherently safer, I suppose.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think a lot of, when you think about investing, it feels risky.
Yeah.
And I mean, there is an element of risk. I'm not saying it's not risky, but I feel like a lot of women, like I said, play it safer. You think, right, but I've got to think of kids, I've got to think of family, so I can't risk money. And that's usually a men thing. And every time I think about investing and this kind of question comes up, I always think about The Wolf of Wall Street. One of my favorite movies, great movie, right? Yeah. But every time you see it, you always see the men on the trading floor. The men are the one taking the risks.
It's full of dudes.
Yeah, that's it, right? I can't remember. The only women I saw were like the wives of the traders. You don't really see women in that space.
The women mooching about in the yacht.
Right, exactly. Which is great as well. But that's what you really see, right? You don't really see women investing. And I think every time I talk to women, it's talking about, okay, so are you investing? What does that look like? And they're like, oh, but that's risky. I kind of, I don't really want to take that risk. And I think also there's a lot of jargon around it. So it almost feels like that, what we touched on earlier, that kind of boys club, where if you don't know what's being said, you're left out. And often women are left out because if you don't understand the jargon, what's an ETF, what's a bond, what's this, stocks and shares, ISA, but should you get this or that? You don't understand any of it. So I'll just avoid it completely because I get savings. I understand savings. I put money in a savings account. I'll leave it there. But if you're talking about actually investing and what kind of products I'm in, what products, I don't know. I'm just going to leave myself out of the conversation.
We haven't been in the game for that long. Do you know what I mean? Like it was 1975 or 6 or something that we only were allowed to take our loans out on our own. We've not been in the game long enough. The system hasn't been designed for us. And I say this all the time. Like, I don't put my entire being around just being a woman, but I do think that as a woman, I need to talk about it because, men have been investing for years in all different types of ways. They've been engaging with the finance market for years in all different types of ways. We're very new to it. In the whole grand scheme of finance, we're very new to this space, and therefore the products aren't designed with us in mind. We don't talk about it the same way we talk about other things. So yeah, I do think it's just going to take more ripples, I think.
It's going to take more ripples and more of this, because I think about, when you mention it, I think about my dad. For the past, I would say 15 years, every morning without fail, he listens to the financial news. He knows exactly what's going on, the new updates, what's changed, what's going on in the economy. Doing it for 15 years. And I think that's because it's male-dominated, male hosts. But women, there's hardly any women who could probably say that I listen or I get my updates every single day unless you're that invested. Unless you're that invested, I was coming to you.
Yeah,
Unless you're that invested.
Yeah,
But in
unless you're the
general,
women in this room.
Yeah.
unless you're in this room. But in general, it's not really the done thing, and there's not
No.
really enough podcasts like women hosts where we can say, well, I'm going to tune in and listen to this and get my updates.
Yeah.
All of that, like you said, it's still very new. So I can understand why maybe women are fearful and maybe step away if you're not sure.
Yeah, a lot of the finance podcasts I listen to regularly, it's a lot of men.
Exactly.
A lot of men, you know. It's sad, actually.
There was some research that came out that said that articles and, you know, blogs and content that was targeted at women focused on cutting back, saving money, all of that stuff that you think of when you think about managing a household, you know, like, and, you know, we see the jokes online on TikTok. It's all like, oh, you know, I hope my husband doesn't see my Amazon, you know, deliveries coming in. So women are portrayed in media as, you know, frivolous spenders, you know, like those lattes, you know, all of those sorts of things are things that we shouldn't be spending our money on. And also that we should be cutting back and stopping those things. Yet when we see content, you know, we don't see content and you go, no, you shouldn't buy another fishing rod. You know, like, you know, like, oh, that's another fishing rod.
I've never seen that.
You know, like, oh, do you think you're being frivolous? You know, you don't see the reverse of that content. And when I think about the podcasts that I listen to that are from men, it's mostly investing and, you know, focusing on your career, you know, that kind of like alpha male kind of stuff that you see online. So actually, the way we're spoken to is different in these spaces. And I just want to mention you saying about, you know, women not being allowed to take out loans. Like, at my daughter's age, my mum wouldn't have been allowed a bank account. And today, whilst I'm doing this, my girls are both out now with their bank cards, buying all sorts of nonsense, you know, and they can. And, you know, it is still new, but I wasn't doing that at their age. And my mum couldn't until she was sort of 14, 15. So, you know, it's very, you know, interesting that in only sort of 3 generations of my family, we've had such a significant change in what is available to women. So going on from this, do you think there's a difference in how men and women approach money and finances?
Don't get me wrong, I don't want this whole conversation for us to come about like, oh, men are the worst, women are the best. If a woman could go away from this conversation and just be like, yeah, I feel confident enough to do something with my money that I wasn't doing before, that's great. And I think even, you know, if we compare men and women, it's very easy to be like, men are riskier, you know, women are safer. But actually, when it comes down to it, women aren't, it's not that we don't want to be risky. It's just we were never taught. We were always taught to be safer, to be, you know, more controlled. And so I suppose it's just about where's the middle ground and how much education do we need to provide people to get there? Like, I think personally, it's so apparent in the next generation. I get to teach, you know, school kids all the time with my work, and I see it every year. You know, the junior school years, you're very much the same. The level of risk, that level of appetite is very similar. And then as they get a little bit older, and by sixth form, it's always the guys at the front with their hands up wanting to tell me something, and I'm like, you're not the teacher. And it's always the girl at the back that's like in silence, and then comes to me at the end and will ask all her questions then, and I'm like, where were you for the last hour? And she's like, oh, I'll email you. And I'm like, I was here. I'm like, I've been here for you. Where, like, and I think, yeah, for me, it's from those next gen approaches, I would say, that makes all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I think men, again, it's not, this whole podcast isn't bashing men.
No.
Men are good, women are good, right?
Yeah, we all have great men in our lives.
Exactly. It's fine. But I think in your example, Abby, I think men are probably more willing to put their hands up and ask those questions, and women will ask those questions, but behind the scenes, because I'm not sure if it's a silly question. And I think we need to remove that stigma. And I always tell people, when people say, oh, it might be a silly question, I'm like, that you can never ask a silly question.
No.
If you don't know the answer, then it's not a silly question. But I think we just all need to feel more empowered to put your hands up. I think one thing that my parents have always instilled in me is, if you don't know, just ask. And the chances are there's probably other people who have the same question in the room. They just might not be as brave as you.
Yes.
So I'm someone, I'll sit at the front every time. Doesn't matter what I mean, I can be by myself, I'll sit at the very front because I want to get the information. If I don't understand something, I'm going to ask my question, because I don't want to go home and say, I didn't actually understand that. I'm going to ask everything.
I'm
I think
the
if
person
we all feel that
people are rolling their eyes at because they want to get out the stuff.
Yeah, I'm not. My hand is going up. I'm asking the question.
I'm like, wait a minute.
I love that.
don't
Be
get it.
brave.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I was as you were talking there, ladies, I was sitting there thinking, are we, we're framing this question like, why are women such cautious investors? Are we having this same conversation in male-dominated spaces going, why are,
Why are you so arrogant?
why are men so, such cautious savers?
Yeah.
Why are they so risky with their funds? And, can we flip some of this narrative so that we have a more consistent approach with men and women? Do we think that the finance industry does enough to cater for women's specific needs or concerns? And I would follow that up with, do we have specific needs or concerns? And, what are they?
I just think we need more education.
Yes.
I think there needs to be wherever these and it also, I don't even think this is gendered, because there are some young men out there that just feel like they're lacking in education. I think what we need is more education before we start investing, because if there isn't any, often people just take very uncalculated risks, and they invest in things they don't quite understand, but so-and-so said that it was a surefire. They don't know what that means. They don't really know how to get their money out eventually. So yeah, more education I think is what we need. Do you know what? I just think it's really important that when if you go onto a trading platform, that you see people that look like you. Because so many investment platforms, you'll look at their Instagram and it's just all men. And I'm like, that's not appealing. Like, I don't feel like I belong there. Like you said, it's community.
Yeah.
You just don't feel like you belong in their world. So I think education and even just a picture of a woman. I'm like,
Yes,
oh,
would be
okay.
helpful. Yeah,
There is
absolutely.
a woman in this space. Like,
And not necessarily just a middle-aged white woman.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
no, we understand that.
We need a mix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
a mix.
But yeah, that's where I'd start.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of the time, the conversation isn't around lifespan. Like, women tend to live longer than men.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of women don't realise, because their retirement savings are usually half that, if not more, of men, but you live longer than men.
Yeah.
And I don't think, financial institutions, I don't think enough is being done to tell women, this is why it's so important that you need to get your ducks in a row as soon as possible. Because if your retirement savings only last you 8 years, but yet you're going to be here for another 20 years, are you going to work again? But then you don't want to keep working. So what do we need to do now, early on, to make sure that you're okay? And I think there are a lot of things even within that women experience. Things as well, women, we have periods, we have all these kind of things. Sometimes some people have periods that are so debilitating that they can't go to work. So if sick pay doesn't cover it, what can you do to cover yourself? There's all kinds of things that we have that men don't experience.
Yeah.
Where we kind of, I feel like financial institutions, banks and education needs to come around that, so women can know and say, right, if I'm going to be here till 85 and the man next door is only going to be here till 72, I need to make sure I've got more money to last me till 85 so I can be there.
And also we need to factor in things like parenthood and the impact that has, on income, because that affects the amount we can save, the amount we can invest. Also the implications of things like divorce. We don't talk enough about that and how we need to show up as women to protect our finances in those situations. And I was wondering, you mentioned periods, and I thought, do we need to start taking girls out? Like they separate them when they do the puberty talk. And it's like the boys go in this room and, the girls go in here, and was like, right, okay, you are going to have a period, but that's not the point. You need to start investing.
The period's happening. Whether you like it or not, your investing might not. That is so true. I think we should do, that's a new business.
That's it. Take them out. Like,
It's hashtag period talk, but actually it's investing.
It's like, here's a pack of sanitary towels, and also here's a stocks and shares ISA.
Yeah.
Here's a little QR code. It's all set up for you. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, we should work with Tampax.
Get that in there.
Yeah, be like, get QR codes on the back of Tampax. Are you investing, ladies? That's so funny.
Also, you need like 10 years on top of the boys to
Yeah,
get started on
right.
this. So we'll talk about this in sixth form with them, but like, you're in year 5. Let's get going.
Let's go. Starting early.
Year 5. Yeah, fair.
So how can we encourage more women to start investing outside of the puberty lessons that we've just mentioned? How can we encourage more women to start investing and to take control of their finances?
I think a good thing, like we mentioned, the word of this podcast is representation. Us just being in the space is already propelled probably more women than we know to look into investing, to look into building their wealth. But I think number two, we need to have more education. That does feel a bit more woman focused. So, women speaking to women, this is an example where women can watch this and feel like, oh, okay, cool. So I can do this and I am part of the conversation. It's not just a male dominated space. And I think empowering them, and like stats like what we just said, like women live longer, yet they have half that of men when it comes to retirement age. That is such a drastic stat that when women hear that, they're like, not going to be me. I need to change something today. So I think when you realize the severity of where we're at with a lot of women, what can you do now to change it? Doesn't matter what age you are. If you're in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, there's always still time that you can do something. It's just about acting today. What can we do?
Yeah, I would say, like, when you're if you go on like a girls' holiday around the pool, or you're just like the girls on like a Thursday, you're just with other women, have that uncomfortable first line. Just be like, right, who's investing? I've done it. I've been around the pool. Last year, I was in Mallorca and it was only girls around the pool. And I was like, right, girls, I'm asking you a question. Who's investing? And they all laughed at me and they were like, oh my God, Abby, give it a rest. And I was like, no, I'm not giving it a rest. If I'm dragging you kicking and screaming into those stocks and shares ISAs, like, you
I always
understand?
worry that my friends will get interviewed and they'll be like, she's never mentioned this to us.
Yeah.
No, I'm not having that.
No, I don't think that'd be possible with my friends. They're sick of it. But I think it's like, have that first line that will make everyone laugh and make it uncomfortable, and then keep going.
Yeah.
Like, don't just stop when someone goes, oh God, I have no idea. Go find someone. Like, I love it when I hear someone's like, oh, you should follow this person, or you should follow that person. Like, it's great. It means you're talking. And I think that's the easiest way, is just to have the difficult first line and then keep going. Because often we feel very comfortable having, someone, because it could have been so easy when the girls laughed at me around the pool for me to be like, all right, no worries, don't worry about it, we won't talk about it. Yeah. But actually I was like, no, you're going to listen and it's going to be really uncomfortable, but you're going to thank me, because, women living longer than men means, on average, obviously the accountant's coming out here, but you go through inheritance tax twice. You go through it once with your parents, and then you go through it again with your husband, if that's your life. And that is a huge implication for women. It's huge. The inheritance tax system, personally, needs reform because it doesn't help women. It's so confusing, so stressful. And actually, it's a lot of money all up, like, that you need to find if you become liable for tax. And so many people, young women, especially at the moment, I'm hearing it's happening. It's being a problem for them. It's because house prices have risen so drastically, but the thresholds haven't changed for inheritance tax. And so what we're seeing is all those houses that parents bought for like £10 when they were in their noughties or 90s that are now worth some. Honestly, I had I had a friend who had her mum had bought this house, and in the 20 years she's owned it, they happened to basically build one of the like biggest train stations in Kent right next to it. Oh, wow. So it's now worth a fortune because it's so commutable. And she didn't pay a fortune for it, so therefore you've got all of the liability of that, and she didn't have anything else. But then you are expected to pay that inheritance tax within months, and she couldn't because everything was tied up in that house. And without education around what you can do to plan for that, how you can contact at HMRC, all these things you can do, genuinely, her first port of call was to go and get a loan. And I was like, you don't need to do that. But because of lack of discussion, that's what happens. And I think this is why we need to be having these conversations, because women end up in these positions all the time. It's happening every day.
Yes, absolutely.
And let's face it, because women live longer, even if you have a man in your life, the likelihood is there is going to be a period in your life where you are left to deal with the household finances on your own. And I saw it happen, with my nan. And my granddad passed away, and we looked through her things. She had something like 5 Sky subscriptions or something like that. And we were like, Nan, she was like, I just didn't know. Like, I don't know how the bank statements work. Oh, wow. And so, we have to accept that at some point in our lives, even if you go like super traditional and you leave your parents' house and you get married to a man and he manages the finances, he's probably going to peg out before you. It's just a sense of reality. I didn't expect to be in a point in my life where my husband wasn't there, and yet here I am. Fortunately, I always dealt with the finances anyway. But we need to be prepared for those moments, and we're not because of lack of discussions and lack of education. So to kind of like round this up a little bit, what advice would you give to women who want to start making their money work for them through investing and better financial planning?
Just start. I know that's so blasé and so easy for me to say, but just find a trading platform and just open the accounts. Like it's the hardest part is the first step. You know, the opening the accounts doesn't cost you anything. You know, it's the putting your money in and that stuff that then gets tricky. But just open it, because that's the hardest part. I think people say to me, oh, I'm going to spend the weekend looking and deciding what I want to do. And I'm like, oh my God, just start. Like it's, you know, you can't build anything from nothing. Just start. It's that whole book, 0 to 1. 0 to 1 is the hardest part, you know. So yeah, I would say that's maybe a very easy cop out of an answer, but
think of it like flat pack furniture.
Yes.
You got to buy it and then you read the instructions.
Yes.
So, you know, if you're going to start building these things and start building your wealth, you actually do have to go out there and start the thing first and figure it out as you go. And there's lots of education out there, isn't there? You know, like we all talk about this, you know, we've all got books.
Yes.
You know, so, you know, like there's things that you can read, like your little IKEA instructions whilst you're doing it to make it feel less scary. So
your Kia instructions.
Yeah.
That's me. To add on to what you just said, just start. I think one big thing you need to do as well is to understand where you're at. Be very honest, lay all your finances on the table. I like to do that. Make it like a little money date, but you need to understand exactly where you're at. How much money do you have coming in? Where is it going out to? Because you can invest, but do you have enough money to invest? How much money do you have to invest? So I think you need to have that honest conversation with yourself. And I know a lot of people who don't check their bank balance because they're scared. We need to overcome that today. Log in, have a look, and then write down everything. And then you can kind of, you know where you're going moving forward and what maybe you need to change to be able to build that wealth for yourself.
I love that. There's so much good advice that we've given today, so much information. Thank you so much, ladies, for having this conversation and just being that representation that, you know, we try and strive to be every day. And I think here we've got such a lovely sort of diverse mix of backgrounds, and we're all speaking as women, but from our own unique viewpoints. And it's been so interesting to hear those today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Where Your Money Works podcast, brought to you by XTB with our guests Kia Commodore and Abigail Foster, as well as myself, Charlotte Jessop. Subscribe to the XTB YouTube channel and download the XTB app to start making your money work for you.